All right, so here's my attempt at describing what we're talking about. The way that your muscles work, we're going to talk about three things. The way that your muscles and tendons and joints work, the way that the torso can relax, and then the way that the wrist can relax, and hopefully you'll find some help from this. So let's start with the muscles. The way that your muscles work is they contract like accordions, and they pull a tendon, which is like a rope. So think of like a drawbridge in front of a castle. The inside of the castle is the muscle that pulls the chain is the tendons, and then the bridge is the bone that gets pulled and moves. And the point where the bridge meets the castle is the lever or the joint. And so if we were to use our elbow as a simple example to understand this, the muscle, the castle, is up here. It contracts, which pulls the chains or the tendons, and that pulls the drawbridge or the forearm up. And the reason that articulation is able to happen is because there's a joint there at the elbow that lets you do it. So your elbow is kind of like a drawbridge. Now, the way that you perceive, when you hear musicians talk about tension, what tension is two things. It's the perception of, it's proprioception. There's a scientific word for it. And proprioception is the sixth sense. It's what lets you sort of feel your internal body. It's what lets you know that your muscles are being stretched when you're stretching, or your muscles are exerting. So like if you go for a long hike and your legs feel tired, if you bench press and you feel your arms getting tired, that's proprioception telling you, your muscles are exerting and you're getting worn out. And it's also like just kind of feeling things, like when you're stretching, it's that feeling of like the skin even being stretched as well. It isn't always just the muscle. So part one is what is tension, and how do we feel? It's that proprioception, that feeling of stretching and or muscle exertion. So now let's talk about how that works. So in regards to posture, basically, you kind of have your spine comes from the center. This is basically Alexander technique with more precision. So you have your spine, and your spine can rotate to the left or right. It can flex forward or backward, and it can go side to side. And then you basically have the same set of motions kind of in the upper back and neck, where you can lean forward and backward. You can go side to side, and like this. And so what you do is, in order to develop your sense of proprioception with all of those motions I just laid out for you, and there are basically three, you kind of group them into three, right? Because you go this way or this way, that's one. Forward or backward, that's two. Side to side, that's three. And so that helps you group it together mentally. And then you take each one of those and you start with big motions that you can really feel the proprioception. You can feel things being stretched. You can feel muscles being exerted. And that trains your body to learn to feel. Then you do smaller motions. So now there's also tension here. I have a lot of issues with this where I'm like reaching around the guitar to try to get to the strings in the right hand. And so you got to learn to develop those sense of, you need to start with big motions so it's really obvious, and then train yourself for the more subtle ones. And then once you've done that, you learn to bring the instrument to you rather than bringing yourself to the instrument. So like what I'm doing, one of my problems was leaning forward to the guitar and rotating a little bit, which was causing some issues. And so what I had to learn to do was to feel that, relax, and then bring the guitar to me. So in terms of posture, which we typically think is like the torso, you want to figure out how to get to this relaxed center and then bring the trumpet to you. Now, whether or not you group this under posture is a debate for another conversation and video, but there is a posture to the wrist, and the wrist is really important because those muscles that control the fingers, whether it's trumpet or guitar, run through, the muscles are in the forearm. And so if you look here, you can see the tendons moving and even some of the muscle exertion. You can see like some flexing here if I do really, extreme finger motions, right? So why does that matter? Well, it matters because the wrist can move left or right. This is called deviation, and it can flex going down or it can extend going up. And if you're not engaging the fingers with the finger muscles, but you are engaging the wrist muscles and moving the wrist, the finger tendons travel from the finger muscles through the carpal tunnel in the wrist to the fingers. So even if you're not engaging fingers and finger muscles, but you're engaging wrist and wrist muscles, and you can experience this if you just do it, you're going to see, like, if I flex down, the fingers will splay out because they're being pulled by the wrist joint and the wrist muscles. And that's going to have an impact on trumpet and guitar playing because you can't flex as easily when the fingers are extended. Now, there's one other component to this. There's your muscles bringing the joints into position, and then there's gravity. So if I let the wrist and its muscles relax and I bring it up, you're going to see gravity push it down. So just like we were doing with the torso, we want to really start at neutral. And so what I would do is I'd train myself to line the arm up so that, your upper back and upper arm are tense and exerting muscle right now for this exercise because it has to hold the arm up. But everything from here down is nice and relaxed and in alignment. And then what you do is you do really big motions to see a lot of wrist flexion or a lot of wrist deviation. And you learn what that feels like. And then you start to play with smaller motions. Like this is a little bit of wrist deviation and it's tense. This is not. This is a little bit of wrist flexion. This is not. And you have to feel, because you have to feel the tension, because there's not as much tension from stretching and muscular exertion down here as there is here. So you got to start with big motions and then go to smaller ones so that you learn to feel more subtler and subtler amounts of tension. And then once you feel really confident about that on its own, then you take it to the instrument. So I didn't start with the instrument. I started by learning to move and learning to feel, and then you learn to bring it up. So with the trumpet, and this is where things get tricky, is like sometimes they'll tell you technique, and it's probably true in trumpet as it is in guitar. They'll say, well, you don't want tension in your arms, so you don't want to raise the arm up. Like in the left hand, you're like, oh, you don't, you want to, they'll say you want to like bring just with the fingers rather than use the arm to position the pinky. But that's actually wrong. You're putting a lot of work on your pinky to do the pinky on its own to bring it down all the way to the bottom of the neck, versus if you use the arm to at least help it, if not do all the work. And you can position the guitar to make that easier, which is a whole nother subject. But I say that to say this. With the trumpet, I don't know what you're going to have to do, but probably if you're like this, you're going to get some wrist flexion from gravity. So you're going to have to find a spot on trumpet where the wrist just feels like it's in alignment. And you're a good trumpet player, so you'll know. If your experience is anything like mine, when you get that wrist line up and the fingers can just flow because the wrist isn't messing with the finger tendons and muscles, dude, you're going to feel the difference. Like, you'll just start flying. So, yeah, give that a try, and I don't know. If it doesn't work, well, you're right back to where you started. Peace.